Hello and welcome to Parker's Podium, where I, Lucas Parker, give my opinions about films that you may or may not have seen, and there will be spoilers. So if you think you're going to be interested in watching it, don't watch this video. Now, in today's week we are going to be discussing the film Adanggaman. I hope that I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly. Or it could also be pronounced Adanggaman. And I'm going to give a brief synopsis of what this film covers, and then we'll get into it. So, first of all, we meet the man Ose. He is a young man living in a village in Africa. We don't get a specific setting. We do have a time. It's middle to late 17th century. Unfortunately, we're never given a specific place that this takes place in. It's just Africa as a whole, as to keep it fiction. Ose and his father get into a spat about who Ose has to marry. He has an arranged marriage, as his father and mother are either rulers of this village or nobility of some kind. It's never made clear. Ose runs off in the middle of the night, only to come back to watch his village burn and see his father and his girlfriend killed. However, he can't find the body of his mother, so he begins to look for wherever the rest of the villagers went. He eventually finds the Amazon warriors taking back a great deal of slaves to presumed Adanggaman, and he follows them there. Later on, Ose gets hurt by one of the warriors and is treated by an old man in Adanggaman's village. He learns a little bit, and this old man's name is Sori. He takes on a bit of a mentor role for Ose as he's in the village. Eventually, Ose pleads his case to the king, Adanggaman, and offers his slavery in return for his mother's freedom. Adanggaman laughs in his face and instead just takes him as a slave as well as his mother and does not let her free. We find out around this time that Sori had a daughter who was taken from him when she was little, and it is discovered that she is one of the Amazon warriors, particularly the one that nicked Ose with her sword earlier on. She has a moment of clarity, I suppose, and that she realizes what she's been doing is wrong and that this isn't really who she is. So she goes to free Ose's mother. However, she has already been presumably raped and killed. And then she frees Ose, and they run off together. They start a farm together at Naka, that's her name, the Amazon warrior. They start a farm at Naka's old family house from when she was little, and things seem to be going great. They become a couple, and it's great for about 5 minutes before Ose goes out hunting and is captured by Amazon warriors and then enslaved, and Naka is killed by Amazon warriors who found their homestead and did not like that she ran off. In the end of the movie, we find out that Adanggaman, the ruler, was captured by one of his aides while he was drunk and sold to the Americas as a slave. And we also find out that Ose never becomes a free man again, as he is sold to the Americas as well. Now, some main points that I wanted to talk about from this film is the influence of where it came from. This film was created by Roger Nonan Mbala, and it was made to be featured in the film festivals in the Ivory Coast, where Mbala is from. I believe, however, it took 1 or 2 years to be released in the Ivory Coast in the film festivals, but it was shown in countries around it. And one of the main ideas of where the influence for this film came from is that it was made to cause discomfort and to have a commentary on those to blame for slavery. And while I don't think it was made to lessen the burden that slavery is given to the Europeans and the Americans, it is also to take an inward look at African history and say, we had a part in this, we should own up to it, which seems to be getting a little bit lost. I've heard through oral traditions, since a good part of Africa doesn't keep, history textbooks and whatnot, so it's a lot of oral history passed down through the generations. I also think it does a great job of keeping it fictional, as to not be restrained by certain historical technicalities. Like I mentioned earlier, this film did not showcase a specific setting for it, only a time frame. We're given Africa, which is not a country, so it's just a continent. There's a lot of different parts to Africa, whether or not you're in Kenya or on the Cape, or you're just somewhere completely different. It's quite a large continent at that, so not every country is going to look the same as the other ones. And I believe I believe the film was done more on the west coast of Africa, possibly specifically in the Ivory Coast, since this is where Mbala is from, and it would just be, it'd make it easier to do filming there and whatnot, but that may not be where it's set. Another topic that I wanted to hit on was the point of view. We mainly follow the Panther's journey. That's what we find out later Osei and his tribe used to call themselves. We specifically look at Osei as a protagonist of this film, as we want him to win. It doesn't seem as though he can catch a break. He's constantly, we start out the film with him fighting with his father. His father sends men after Osei to beat him up and teach him a lesson, quoting that discipline is achieved with the force of a big stick. It's a very harsh dynamic that this village has. They also are very obedient to ancient law and, respecting elders and things like that. We have another quote from the father in the spat saying, "Ancient law must be obeyed." A lot of time in the film is spent on watching the Amazon warriors transverse the mountainscapes and the deserts and jungles with the prisoners and captives, which I thought was interesting, that they spent a lot of time really showcasing what it was like moving these people throughout all of the parts of that film. It never really showed the Amazon warriors letting up or being kind to any of the captives. They were consistently yelling, always saying things like, "Let's go, you stinking beast." And an interesting thing that I noticed is that they often referred to their captives as beasts, and later we find out the king Adanggaman refers to them as monkeys. Specifically, it's dehumanizing them and not considering them of the same value as themselves, which this is kind of needed for somebody to do something so horrible, such as taking away somebody's free will. If you were to consider somebody on the same level as you would think of it as wrong to enslave them or do other vile acts to them. So it's very clear that these people don't consider them on the same level as their captives. Later on in the film, we see the ideas behind Adanggaman's horrible actions. Actions include, rape, killing, plundering, village burning, genocide, and slavery. And we see that he's become power hungry and greedy for the most part. He considers himself an equal with the European monarchs and rulers, at one point considering them, I believe he said, his colleagues. So he sees himself on the same level as them and high above everybody else around him. So he doesn't see it as wrong to take these people prisoner and sell them off for what money he can get. As far as historical accuracy, this was a fictional movie with no specific setting, so it was not tied to specific, historical facts. There were certain things in there that were facts, such as the all-female Amazon warriors being, very vicious. Transatlantic slave trade did happen. Black Africans enslaving other Black Africans did happen. But there's no specifics of this is this current day village and this is another current day town or village and they fought and one of them won. It's not accurate in that sense. However, it does have other points that it does get for accuracy, such as the rulers being power hungry. You know, that seemed to be a bit of a common theme throughout different African countries in history, and not just Africa. I mean, in the Americas, in Europe, in Asia, it's all over. Rulers get power hungry, and that's what causes turmoil and empires to fall. I know that in separate parts of Africa, people get hungry for different things. I know around this point in time, there was a lot of gold mining in Africa. So a lot of slaves that were bought and sold locally were used in gold mines, which is obviously a very power-hungry thing to do. It's specifically to get more money from the gold. There also was a heavy emphasis on the afterlife. When Osei finds his father dead on the ground, he says to him, "Peace be with your soul, sometimes the dead are more alive than the living." So there is this heavy emphasis on the afterlife. We see it later with a burial ceremony for Sori, the old man who took on a father figure / mentor relationship with Osei. And we also see it as Sori is talking about ancient customs and ancient rituals. At one point, Sori talks about how they have potions from ancient healers, which Osei makes a point to say that it tastes, I believe, like antelope blood. So it may not so much as be a potion, but Sori responds that they need to respect the ancient customs and ways. And at one point, Sori performs such a sort of a shell ritual in sand where he throws shells and reads them as to, read a prophecy. Something else that they touch on is the respect for their elders. Even after Sori dies unexpectedly, he still has a burial ceremony, and he was not a slave in Adanggaman's village, but he was not a respected noble or anything of the sort, but they still held a burial ceremony for him. That's all for my 3 main points. Some other points that I'd like to touch on that this film did particularly well is how horrible it truly shows the slavery experience to be. At one point, when Sori dies unexpectedly, possibly of a heart attack or something similarly, all of the slaves around him had no reaction. He was sitting with Osei, who was chained up in a large group of slaves. They were chatting. Sori reveals that Naka is his daughter, and that he thought she was dead or long gone. And then he dies unexpectedly, and nobody around him has any sort of reaction. I think this film does an excellent job showing how horrible it was and how difficult it would have been to go through that and try to keep a positive mindset. This film really it really showed how horrible and difficult the slave issue was, and I've heard that this film is a little bit taboo across African culture, or at least in the Ivory Coast and surrounding countries, that it was shown in film festivals because it deals on the topic of black on black slavery, which isn't something that they like to remember, which is understandable, but I think it does a really amazing job at showing how horrible it was and things that actually happened. And that should be all from my movie review of Adanggaman. Next week we'll be touching up with things a bit more lighthearted. We'll be taking a step back towards the Americas as we take a look at something from there. I won't say what, I don't want to give it away, but we will be taking a step back from the deep topics. I know this past month has been a bit difficult, as all of my reviews have been a bit heavy-handed in their depth of tragic history. So next week we'll be taking a step back, and hopefully you'll tune back in. This is Parker from Parker's Podium signing off. Have a good night.